Good to have you with us in the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. In fact, today it's a 2-hour special edition from 8 to 10. We're focusing on one key issue, but various angles to it. One issue, the farmers' protests over the farm laws, but various battlegrounds. One battleground, of course, that we've constantly covered, the borders where the protests have been taking place. But today, there are so many more layers to it. The whole face-off which is taking place on the social media battleground, which is effectively triggered off because of Rihanna and Greta Thunberg, but has now become a big issue in our own country with our own celebrities fighting with each other, with the government responding, the police responding. So much that has happened on the social media battleground. The second one that we addressed was the political battleground. Opposition MPs marching to protest sites, sloganeering inside the parliament, Priyanka Gandhi meeting a farmer's family, a deceased farmer's family, Aam Aadmi Party locking horns with the Delhi police and with the Punjab Congress Party. All of that surround sound when it comes to the politics of it. The third one, which is going to be the focus now at 9 o'clock, is the global battleground. And by that, I don't just mean, again, pop stars and climate activists, but I actually also mean governments and parliaments across the world and those who have now taken note of the farmers' protests and what's going on in our country. That's what we're going to talk about now. And after this will be the fourth battleground, equally important, the investigation, the challenge of fake news, what's happening on ground, the protests at the borders and what the Delhi police is really up to. So we're going to get you all of those updates. We'll also tell you all the fake news that's going around over the farmers' protests and how you need to put your guard up when you get anything on your phone, whether it's on Twitter or it's on your WhatsApp or anywhere else. But for now, let's talk about the global battleground. And why is that? Because after the international celebrities began to tweet about the farmers' protest, and began to question why people were not talking about it and began to express their support to the Indian farmers who have now been protesting for many, many weeks. It was our government which actually responded. And that kind of gave it a legitimate value to what these celebrities were saying. Otherwise, it would have probably just been a Twitter war gone on for some time with the Indians on one side and the global celebs on the other. But the government responded and said that the foreign voices are sensationalist. MEA also said that there are vested interest groups who are trying to enforce their agenda. Now, while MEA, our External Affairs Ministry, was the first one to come out with the statement, at some point the US government was also asked about their views because this is now an international story. The US government actually backs the Indian farm laws. They said that reforms are much welcome, but they also stand for peaceful protests, that in any democracy, peaceful protests should be allowed. I don't know why that was required at that point, but the US government did add that as part of their statement. The MEA also said, by the way, that you must understand any issue before commenting. And also on the other side, in UK Parliament may end up considering holding a debate on the farm laws. Their people have begun their own campaign. An online petition has started to gather more and more signatures, and if they reach a certain level, then the parliament may actually consider picking up this issue. Not the first time. Several UK MPs have spoken about India's farm laws and the protests going on in the past as well. So let's talk about the global battleground and how we need to treat this now and how we should be viewing this. Ambassador Neelam Deo, director at the Gateway House and a former diplomat, of course, joining us this evening. And Smita Sharma, senior journalist, also with us this evening. Smita, I want to start off with you. Were you surprised that the Ministry of External Affairs decided to issue a statement on what a bunch of celebrities had been saying?
Absolutely, Tanvi. Very good evening to you and both Ambassador Neelam Deo. I mean, it is baffling to me. I have been reporting on this beat for almost 17 years now. And I do not recall an incident where a government would come out with such a strong statement against individual citizens, foreign private citizens, some of them artists. I mean, if art is supposed to transcend borders, art is are also considered as global brand ambassadors. And there have been several cases across the world where artists, sportspersons at different times have spoken up on issues, be it championing of human rights, minority rights, to women's rights as well, or during the global Me Too movement, to Black Lives Matter movement, where so many Indians were actually tweeting about it ferociously. So for a government, I mean, if this was some government, I think as Suhasini had referred to it as the Republic of Rihanna. If this was a Republic of Rihanna statement, I could understand the Ministry of External Affairs coming out with that kind of a response. And then to see our own legends and celebrities talk about, referencing about some kind of an impinging on India's sovereignty. Is this an army of celebrities that is invading the country's borders? Rightly, I think this matter should have been ignored. What, at the end of the day, what did Rihanna tweet? She tweeted a link to a CNN article that is talking about the heavy security clampdown measures. She wasn't taking a stand. She simply asked as to why isn't the world taking notice of it. But by putting out that statement, and we are made to understand through sources that actually the main part of the anger may actually have been triggered because of Meena Harris's tweets, the US Vice President Kamala Harris's niece. But even so, and now for the ministry to be saying that, oh, we were not targeting private citizens through sources, I mean, it's baffling. It's absurd. I have not seen something like this, at least in my 17 years of reporting career as far as the foreign policy beat is concerned.
Well, you say if it was Republic of Rihanna, perhaps one could understand. She has about 101 million followers on Twitter. Perhaps people do believe that that is some kind of following that must be addressed. But of course, I mean, jokes apart, it was a little surprising. Does it maybe allude to the fact, Ambassador Deo, that the government believes that this is a larger, concerted, organized propaganda with maybe bigger people in the background, and so it needs to be nipped in the bud, as some have been telling us?
So I don't know the answer to what government is, what is prompting the government's response. But I do want to say that we now live in a world where nobody ignores Twitter. I think we all know that the whole Trump phenomenon in the United States was built up. He became the president, and he continued through his 4 years to tweet policy, to tweet the sacking of his own officials, to attack people that he didn't like, etc. So I certainly think it is the first time that Ministry of External Affairs has issued a statement like this. But let us not pretend that we can ignore what happens on Twitter just because it's a singer or it's Greta Thunberg, who has had a quite prominent role and position on environmental issues. So I want to make that as the starting point. I want to say one other thing. When all of this started, and Rihanna with her 100 million followers, etc., if the government had not responded in any way, then the criticism would have been exactly that. Why is the government not responding? She has 100 million followers. Why has government not done anything? They should do something. So I think government is in a situation where it's damned if it does and it's damned if it doesn't. I think that you can have a serious opinion and a discussion and criticism of, was this the best way to respond? But I think government does not have the option anymore to ignore what's happening on social media. It has a huge impact. I mean, so many political developments in countries, and we talk about the United States right now because everything that has happened there recently, I mean, QAnon, I mean, all of those kinds of sites which propagate all sorts of outrageous ideas about how the Democrats are eating babies and things like that. But 17 million people followed those things, and they voted for Trump again. So let us not act as if what happens on Twitter is some irrelevant, unimportant question.
Okay, I take your point. Interesting that you say that, and of course we've seen that in US, especially during Trump's era, it did play a big role. In our country right now, we've seen just in the recent past, government moving and issuing a notice to Twitter for not acting fast enough and suspending certain accounts that they wanted to. But let's come to the other aspect. Now what from here on? Smita, we've seen that the US government has commented, and while they back the laws, they've spoken about peaceful protests and democracy and democratic values. We know that many in that administration do have a very strong India connection, so they would perhaps also be tracking this closely and have a view on it. In UK, in Canada and many other places, a lot of noise politically is also being generated. What should the Indian government strategy then be? Should we give it more credence than the MEA statement that's already come out, or should we now leave it and just focus internally on the issue itself?
No, it's too late now. I mean, I would just like to disagree slightly with what Ambassador Deo said. I mean, I didn't mean to say ignore on what they are saying, but the point is a government reacting to private foreign citizens. Tomorrow, imagine if the Biden administration were to come out and put out a statement because Priyanka Chopra Jonas was saying something about a Me Too movement in the US, a Black Lives Matter in the movement, or the US Capitol violence of 6th January. It would be a surprise. It would be baffling, and I think what people need to understand, because there are several spin masters at work here, there's a whole lot of propaganda that's happening on all sides. But let's also remember, it's become a huge propaganda war. Let's remember, these celebrity voices or these prominent voices have not spoken up really. The farm agitations have been on for 2 months. They perhaps wouldn't have spoken up if these images hadn't emanated from the national capital of the world's largest democracy. You are talking about concertina wires, barbed wires, barricades, digging out trenches. Those images from Ghazipur, the peaceful, sit-in protest sites. Yes, it happened on 26 January. Scores of policemen were injured. That was absolutely condemnable. It should not have happened. But there are a lot of incidents, related incidents there and characters like Deep Sindhu that need to be investigated. Having said that, the sit-in protests in Ghazipur and Singhu border, they have remained peaceful for 2 months with elderly people, young children, all of them sitting in there through the harsh winter. And then when you have these images coming out of the national capital, this is what has captured the world's attention at the moment. So these celebrities are not commenting on the legalities or on the merits of the farm bill. That is another debate that, of course, it needs to be debated within parliament. It's about the right to protest in a democracy that has found all this attention for. And by the government, we saw this entire victim crying after Article 37 in the wake of the abrogation of Article 370 during CAA, during NRC protests. I mean, to continuously say that it is a part of an entire international lobby. Canada is Khalistan, UK is Khalistan, US is left liberals, US is biased English elite media, as the External Affairs Minister at one point in time put it. You have to realize that you are talking about the world's largest democracy. If the press is being slapped with charges of sedition on cases of errors or mistakes, if there are constant images of these protesters that the water supply is not being able to reach them properly, doctors are complaining that how doctors are not being able to reach protest sites, press is being kept apart from the protest sites, this will draw attention. And I think the government will have to then deal with these issues in a more matured manner without getting so hypersensitive about things. Because if your celebrities come out on a propaganda war and start tweeting with the hashtags, how it's a propaganda versus propaganda. So if you are saying that, how does that make this right?
Yeah. In fact, in the first part of our conversation tonight itself, this is exactly what we spoke, that and I would say this to both sides, that, well, if that was propaganda and a pre-planned campaign to generate noise across the world about this issue, the response has been seemingly is equally planned as well, and perhaps the right way to go. Instead of the government responding, but the government has now responded. So I will now take it to the next step and ask Ambassador Deo this question. Ambassador Deo, now we are in the spotlight. Now, the whole world's talking about it, and there will be so many more articles and so many more reports that even the foreign media is going to write and talk about what's happening at our borders, show those visuals of barricades and concertina wires and the nails on the road and everything. Now, how do we deal with this issue, not just internally, but also at an international level?
I actually want to agree with Smita that the protest by the farmers had been entirely peaceful and actually quite admirable. So it's not that I disagree with a great deal of what she is pointing out to you and to the viewers. I agree with that. I also do agree that I don't think it does our image any good to have these kind of barricades put up. But what I want to say is that the substance of the issues is being ignored by our own media as well as people like this who have gone on to tweet. The supporting the farmers' right to protest, yes, but actually they have been protesting for months without anybody interfering with that. In fact, the government has been quite flexible. It has offered many stages, clause by clause, going through with the farmer representative. It has now offered to defer imposing these farm laws for a year and a half while discussions go on, etc. The farmers have genuine concerns, and we should recognize those. But it is no negotiating position to say, this is my minimum and my maximum negotiating position, that the farm laws have to be repealed. That's a separate issue. But I think the substantive issue that we need to look at, especially as it concerns countries like Canada, UK, and the United States, all of whose governments have spoken. From Canada, it was the Prime Minister himself who made statements a month ago on these issues. These are the same governments which pressurize India in the World Trade Organization on the fact that we have a PDS, we have a public distribution system for which wheat is acquired, wheat and rice from particularly Punjab, but also Haryana, and they are paid a minimum support price. They have argued for years that this is illegal and that government of India has to stop it. So my recommendation to Greta Thunberg or whoever is go to the European Union and tell them to stop pressurizing government of India to do these things. Let the Americans, let the Canadians take a position in World Trade Organization that yes, in India, farmers are not so wealthy as they are in their countries, and that there are many poor people and consumers in rural and urban India who need PDS supplied wheat and rice. Let them go there. If they really have an interest, then that is what they should be arguing about. The other thing I do want to point out, one more thing, and that is on environmental issues. Is anybody concerned with the fact that the water table in Punjab has fallen so low that in 20 years, we will not have water there? But they want to continue with this pattern of agriculture, growing wheat and rice, which obviously cannot continue to be done in a sustainable way. Is it appropriate that one of the farmers' demands is that they will continue to burn rubble and make Delhi, already the most polluted city in the world, even more unlivable? What I'm trying to say is that there are real hard issues here which have to be negotiated in international forums. Nobody wants to get into that, but it's nice. Yeah, you come out and say, shouldn't we be looking at this? Shouldn't we be talking about that? And actually, I feel that our farmers have acted in responsible ways, more so than these international celebrities who are only looking for a momentary response.
In fact, you've raised two very valid points, and I just want to highlight this to our viewers again. The issue of United States and countries like US and Canada pressurizing India, and they've done this for years now on our agriculture policies, on the fact that we give this minimum support price to our farmers, which effectively is much, much higher than what the WTO regulations they say is, and that is where there's been quite a bit of clash between the two sides, and India has been holding out. So for these governments and their people to now come out and question the Indian policy is frankly a little bit hypocritical. But I just want to ask Ambassador Deo this question. I know you said and you made a second very valid point about paddy being cultivated in places like Punjab, But shouldn't that also be a larger part of our government's agri policies? Frankly, our policies when it comes to growing what crop where in this country are all over the place, and at some point we will have to take it up on ourselves, Ambassador Deo, to educate the farmers and spread awareness to say what also works for them in the long run.
I could not agree with you more. It's not only a question of educating farmers, it is supporting them to move into other crops, to be more multi-cropping patterns. All of those are what agricultural experts know. None of us is an agricultural expert,
yes,
but I do know that there are problems relating to water and salinity of soil in Punjab, which are upon us now. There's one other point I want to make about whether, Priyanka Chopra makes comments in the United States and would the US government react like this, etc. When Priyanka Chopra makes a comment about the US government, it does not have any consequences. But when the US government makes some kind of criticism of India, it has consequences. So what happens is this: there are rich developed countries which can punish developing countries through sanctions. So what they do is they have sanctioned, for example, the Russian president and all of his crony capitalists. Maybe those fellows need to be shamed. But when they issue sanctions on Americans, the result is that Americans then just turn around and say, well, I wasn't planning to visit Moscow in any case. The problem is that people, Russians, Chinese for that matter, and certainly lots of Indians, we have connections in America. If they impose sanctions on us, it has real consequences. People have children there, people have relatives there. Okay. So let us not pretend that, even if we are the largest democracy in the world, we have the same power to be punitive, to impose sanctions. So these are realities, and these are unfortunate realities. I wish we were rich enough, and I wish we were powerful enough to be able to
we have in the past
also do that to
yes,
other people.
Well, at least this government has taken a strong stand. We have in the past done that as well, even at WTO. One can only hope that just a tweet or a couple of tweets from pop stars and singers doesn't really lead to any government, any nation's government taking steps as if imposing sanctions. So we'll wait and watch how it goes. I'm completely out of time, but I really appreciate both Ambassador Deo and Smita Sharma for joining us on angle number 3, which is the global battleground and how this has now become a massive global story. And so not only do our internal affairs and Home Ministry and Agriculture Ministry now need to deal with what's happening in our country, but the MEA has also now been dragged in, and they've issued the first line of statement. The governments, the parliaments across the world now are looking at this issue. Where it goes, we will have to wait and watch.